Have you ever heard a 911 call that didn't come from someone reporting a murder, but from a father whose entire world had just been ripped away? Imagine walking into your own home after running a quick errand, expecting to have dinner with your family, only to find silence where there should have been laughter. Within minutes, that ordinary evening turned into one of the most devastating family tragedies America has seen in recent years. But here's the question that still divides people today. Was this a carefully planned crime, or was it the horrifying result of a mind completely overtaken by severe mental illness? Before we begin, if you enjoy detailed true crime documentaries that break down every piece of evidence without sensationalizing the facts, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Crime Chronicles, and click the bell icon so you never miss another case. Today's story takes us to the quiet coastal town of Duxbury, Massachusetts. It's the kind of place where neighbors know one another, children ride their bikes through peaceful streets, and violent crime is almost unheard of. Families move here looking for safety, excellent schools, and a slower pace of life. It was the last place anyone expected to become the center of a case that would make headlines around the world. At the center of this tragedy was the Clancy family. Patrick Clancy and his wife, Lindsay Clancy, appear to have built the kind of life many people dream about. Patrick worked in the technology industry, while Lindsay was a labor and delivery nurse. Her profession was especially meaningful because she spent her days helping bring new lives into the world. Friends described her as caring, compassionate, and deeply committed to helping mothers during one of the most important moments of their lives. Together, Patrick and Lindsay had 3 young children. Their oldest daughter, Cora, was just 5 years old. Dawson, their energetic little boy, was 3. The youngest, baby Callan, was only 8 months old. Family photos showed smiling faces, holiday celebrations, birthday parties, and ordinary moments that painted the picture of a loving family. From the outside, everything seemed normal. But as many true crime cases remind us, appearances rarely tell the whole story. After Callan was born in 2022, those closest to Lindsay began noticing changes. At first, they were subtle. She struggled with anxiety, had difficulty sleeping, and reportedly became overwhelmed more easily than before. Having a newborn while caring for 2 other young children is exhausting for almost any parent, but according to court records and her defense team, Lindsay's struggles became much more serious. Over the following months, she sought medical help several times. She was evaluated by mental health professionals and prescribed different psychiatric medications. Some medications were adjusted, others were replaced, and doctors continued trying to find the right treatment. According to her attorneys, Lindsay experienced severe depression, anxiety, intrusive thoughts, and episodes that suggested her mental health was becoming increasingly unstable. Patrick also recognized that something wasn't right. Instead of ignoring the warning signs, he reportedly encouraged his wife to seek treatment and supported her throughout numerous doctor's appointments. The family wasn't hiding the fact that she needed help. In fact, she received care from several medical professionals in the months leading up to the tragedy. Even so, there was another side to Lindsay that friends and family continued to see. She still cared for her children. She smiled in photographs. She attended family gatherings. To many people around her, she appeared to be trying her best despite her struggles. That contrast would later become one of the most debated aspects of the entire case. How could someone who appeared loving and devoted also be accused of committing such an unimaginable act? As investigators later pieced together the timeline, they learned that the days before January 24, 2023, seemed relatively ordinary. There were no public signs that something catastrophic was about to happen. The Clancy family continued their daily routines. Patrick went to work. The children played. Lindsay remained at home caring for the family while continuing to manage her mental health treatment. But prosecutors would later argue that behind the ordinary routine, something far more deliberate was unfolding. They would claim that Lindsay had begun making decisions that pointed toward planning. Her defense, however, would argue something entirely different, that her mental condition had deteriorated to the point where she was losing touch with reality. Those 2 opposing narratives would eventually become the foundation of one of the most closely watched murder trials in America. Then came Tuesday, January 24, 2023. It started like countless other winter evenings in Duxbury. The weather was cold, families were settling in after work, and there was nothing to suggest that before the night was over, 3 innocent children would become the center of a national tragedy. According to investigators, Lindsay asked Patrick if he could leave the house to pick up takeout food and medication from a local pharmacy. It seemed like a simple request. Patrick agreed and left, expecting to return shortly. He had no reason to believe those few minutes away from home would change his life forever. When Patrick drove back to the house, something immediately felt wrong. The home was unusually quiet. What he discovered next would become the heartbreaking beginning of a criminal investigation that continues to raise painful questions about motherhood, mental illness, and criminal responsibility. Patrick stepped inside, expecting to hear his children playing or watching television. Instead, he was met with silence. He called out for Lindsay. There was no response. He looked around the first floor but couldn't find anyone. As panic began to set in, he made his way through the house, searching every room. Then he discovered something no parent should ever have to witness. His 3 children were unconscious in the basement. Emergency responders would later determine that each child had been strangled using exercise bands. Patrick immediately called 911 in a state of complete panic, desperately pleading for help. His voice reflected every parent's worst nightmare. He wasn't trying to solve a mystery, he was trying to save his children. As emergency crews rushed toward the Clancy home, Patrick continued searching for Lindsay. Outside the house, he found her lying on the ground beneath a second-story window. Investigators later concluded that after the children had been attacked, Lindsay had attempted to take her own life by cutting herself before jumping from an upstairs window. She survived the fall but suffered devastating spinal injuries that left her paralyzed from the waist down. Inside the home, paramedics fought to save the children. 5-year-old Cora and 3-year-old Dawson were pronounced dead that evening. Baby Callan, only 8 months old, was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Doctors worked around the clock, hoping he might survive. For several days, the nation watched and prayed for the infant. Sadly, despite every medical effort, Callan died from his injuries. What had already been an unimaginable tragedy had now claimed the lives of all 3 children. The quiet neighborhood quickly transformed into an active crime scene. Police vehicles filled the street. Investigators moved carefully through the home, documenting every room, collecting evidence, and trying to reconstruct exactly what had happened during the short period Patrick was away. News spread rapidly across Massachusetts before reaching national and international headlines. People struggled to understand how a labor and delivery nurse, a woman whose career centered on helping mothers safely deliver babies, could be accused of killing her own children. Almost immediately, 2 very different conversations began. One focused on the evidence. The other focused on mental illness. Investigators carefully examined Lindsay's phone, medical records, internet activity, and the timeline leading up to the tragedy. Prosecutors later alleged that asking Patrick to leave the house was not a random request, but part of a deliberate plan to ensure she would be alone with the children. They argued that the timing, the method used, and the sequence of events suggested preparation rather than impulse. The defense saw the same timeline very differently. They argued that Lindsay had been experiencing a severe psychiatric crisis for months. Medical records showed she had seen numerous doctors and mental health specialists. She had reportedly been prescribed several psychiatric medications, with doses adjusted and medications changed as doctors searched for an effective treatment. Her attorneys claimed she suffered from postpartum depression that progressed into postpartum psychosis, a rare but serious condition that can cause hallucinations, delusions, and a complete break from reality. They argued that by January 24th, Lindsay was no longer capable of thinking rationally or understanding the nature of her actions. The debate quickly extended beyond the courtroom. Mental health experts, physicians, parents, and legal analysts all weighed in. Some believed the evidence suggested planning that couldn't be ignored. Others pointed to her extensive psychiatric treatment as proof that she had been desperately ill long before the tragedy. Even Patrick Clancy's response surprised many people. In the days after losing all 3 of his children, he released a heartfelt statement describing Lindsay not as a monster, but as someone whose illness had consumed her. He asked the public not to rush to judgment and urged people to show compassion while also remembering the lives of Cora, Dawson, and Callan. His words shifted part of the public conversation. Many people couldn't imagine showing compassion toward someone accused of such an act, yet Patrick maintained that the woman he married was not the same person he believed existed on that terrible day. Still, prosecutors emphasized that compassion and criminal responsibility are not necessarily the same thing. As investigators completed their work, Lindsay was charged with 3 counts of murder, 3 counts of strangulation, and assault-related charges connected to her attempted suicide and the events inside the home. The stage was now set for what would become one of the most closely watched criminal trials in the United States, a trial that would ask jurors to answer one of the hardest questions in criminal justice. Can someone be responsible for committing an unimaginable act while simultaneously suffering from a severe mental illness? As the case moved toward trial, it became clear that this would not be a typical murder prosecution. There was little dispute about what had happened inside the Clancy home. Instead, the courtroom would focus on a much more difficult question. What was Lindsay Clancy's state of mind when her children died? Prosecutors argued that the evidence pointed to intentional, deliberate actions. They told the jury that Lindsay allegedly chose a time when Patrick would be away from the house, asked him to pick up both takeout food and medication to keep him gone longer, and then carried out the attacks while she was alone with the children. They argued these actions showed planning and awareness, not confusion. According to the prosecution, despite her documented mental health struggles, she still understood what she was doing and knew it was wrong. The defense presented a very different picture. They walked the jury through months of Lindsay's medical history, describing repeated appointments with psychiatrists, hospital evaluations, medication changes, and worsening symptoms after the birth of her youngest son. Her attorneys argued that she was suffering from postpartum psychosis, a rare psychiatric emergency that can involve delusions, hallucinations, and a complete break from reality. They maintained that by January 24, 2023, her illness had progressed to the point that she could no longer distinguish reality from the distorted thoughts created by her condition. During the trial, jurors heard emotional testimony from investigators, emergency responders, and medical professionals who responded that night. They also heard details about Lindsay's psychiatric treatment in the months leading up to the tragedy. Expert witnesses for both sides explained their opinions, but they did not agree. One side argued her behavior reflected purposeful decision-making. The other argued it reflected a catastrophic mental collapse. Patrick Clancy's testimony was among the most emotional moments of the trial. Already carrying the unimaginable grief of losing Cora, Dawson, and Callan, he described the family they once had and the changes he had witnessed in his wife's mental health after their youngest child was born. His testimony reminded everyone in the courtroom that behind every legal argument were 3 children whose lives ended far too soon. As of August 2026, the trial is still ongoing and no verdict has been reached. That means no court has yet determined whether Lindsay Clancy is legally guilty of murder or whether she meets the legal standard for a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity. Until the jury reaches a decision, that question remains unanswered. Regardless of how the trial ends, the case has already left a lasting impact. It has sparked nationwide discussions about postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, access to maternal mental health care, and whether existing healthcare systems do enough to identify and treat mothers in severe psychiatric crisis. At the same time, many believe the focus should never shift away from the 3 innocent children whose lives were lost. Cases like this challenge us because they don't fit neatly into a single explanation. Can a loving parent also become capable of unimaginable violence if their mind is overtaken by mental illness? Where should the justice system draw the line between accountability and severe psychiatric disease? And if warning signs were present, could anything have been done differently to prevent this tragedy? Those are questions with no easy answers, and they're the reason this case continues to divide experts and the public alike. Now I'd like to hear from you. Do you believe Lindsay Clancy should be held fully criminally responsible, or do you believe her documented mental illness changes how this case should be judged? Can someone be both deeply ill and legally accountable at the same time? And what lessons do you think families, doctors, and society should take away from this heartbreaking case? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. If you found this documentary informative, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Crime Chronicles, and click the bell icon so you never miss another in-depth true crime investigation. Until next time, stay safe.